better. All they had done was fill her home with a bunch of pretty but useless things. Things she couldn't even get into her sprawling estate to see. Which explained what she was doing back on Grover Road. Her old trailer was the only place in Bramble, Texas where she could spend the night without the nosy townsfolk finding out and tattling to her brother. And one night was all she needed. First thing in the morning, she was going to pay a little visit to the new bank president and set him straight. By nightfall, she would be right back where she belonged, in a big mansion with a pitcher of margaritas. But until then... She opened the door and stepped out. A blast of 90-degree wind slapped her in the face, and she teetered on her 4-inch Manolo Blahniks before she grabbed onto the side mirror and caught her balance. Pushing the thick strands of blonde hair out of her face, she staggered around the front of the SUV to let Sherman out. The pig didn't like being out in the wind any more than she did. He took his time climbing down, then huddled against her legs as she walked around the piles of rusted junk. A few feet from the front door, the navigator lights clicked off, leaving her and Sherman in thick darkness. Shirlene had never much cared for the dark, or the eerie sound of tree branches creaking in the wind. She glanced around at the sinister shadows. This night isn't fit for man nor beast. Sherman grunted his agreement as they climbed up the sloping front steps that looked as if they were seconds away from becoming nothing more than kindling. Wanting out of the ferocious wind as quickly as possible, Shirlene reached for the battered doorknob. It took numerous twists and a couple of stunned seconds before she realized it was locked. And no one locked their doors in Bramble except the librarian, Ms. Murphy, and only because she lived next door to Elmer Tate, who had trouble remembering where his house was after 7 or more shots of Jack Daniels. Of course, no one had been out to the trailer in years, so maybe Lyle had locked it against looters. The thought made Shirlene smile. Her late husband had been so sure she would want to hang on to her childhood home, so sure that one day the bad memories would be replaced with good ones. Pushing down the sadness that threatened, Shirlene searched for the key that Lyle had given her on their first anniversary, along with a diamond and ruby bracelet. At the time, the jewelry had been much more appreciated, but now, with the darkness and wind pressing against her, she took the time to be grateful for the gift. "Thank you, honey," she whispered up at the moonless sky. "You always did know what I needed, even before I needed it." She unlocked the door, but it still refused to open, almost as if something held it from the inside. Leaning her 5-foot 10-inch frame against the cheap plywood, Shirlene shoved. The door cracked open just wide enough to see a figure in white float past before it slammed shut. The key slipped from Shirlene's fingers and clunked on the steps, followed by her purse, as a chill tiptoed down her spine. Frozen in place, she stared at the door with its fist-sized imprint, put there by Colt during his belligerent teenage years, and tried to figure out what she'd seen, or what she thought she'd seen. If she'd had her nightly margaritas, she could have blamed it on Jose Cuervo. But since being evicted from her home, the only thing swirling around in her stomach was Josephine's chicken fried steak, something that could give you indigestion but not hallucinations, which meant one of two things. Someone had moved into the trailer without her knowing it, or her childhood home was haunted. And since very few things happened in Bramble without Shirlene hearing about it, she was leaning toward the latter. Her heart started to thump like the Bramble High Drum Corps. There might not be a person on the face of God's green earth that she feared, but the macabre was a different matter. Be it ghosts, demons, or the boogeyman, the thought of something she couldn't flirt into submission scared the bejesus out of her. But before she could retrieve her purse and keys and get the hell out of there, Sherman lost patience with the weather and his chicken-livered pig sitter. With a frustrated grunt, he lowered his head and plowed into the door.
to keep listening to this audiobook. I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.